Hello and welcome to ASEAN Pacific shows. In this episode today, we are going to discuss and talk about the EU-Indo-Pacific strategic issues. Is a very widely topic. My guest is Dr. Elli-Katharina Pohlkamp. Dr. Elli-Katharina is a fellow of Asia program at the European Council on Foreign Relations. She previously worked as a Japan analyst based in Munich, as a policy fellow at the Progressives Zentrum Berlin, and as a Japan fellow at the Agora Strategy Group, where she focused on EU-Japan relations and Japanese foreign policy and security in East Asia. She also was a research assistant and a forum Ebenhausen-Scholar at the German Institute of International and Security Affairs, SWP Berlin, and worked at the German Institute for Japanese Studies in Tokyo as a PhD scholar. She holds a PhD from the University of Tübingen, Germany, and has published widely on topics related to Japan's foreign and security policy, Japan's cybersecurity policy, EU-Japanese relations, and security in the Indo-Pacific region. Welcome, Elli. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you very much, Lokman, for the invitation. I'm very happy to be attending your show today, and I hope I can give you some valuable insights on the EU-Indo-Pacific strategy. I'm happy to discuss it with you. And I just want to note I'm representing my personal views today. So everything I say is my own interpretation and is not the EU's official view or of any institution I'm affiliated with. And I'm happy to be discussing with you today. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Elli. Let me shoot out my first question. What are according to your observation and studies, research, what are the main elements of the EU's Indo-Pacific strategy? Can you provide us a brief detailed information about this, please?
Yes, of course. So it is a strategy that for the first time looks at the entire region in the Indo-Pacific. So the aim is to have a strategy for cooperation in order to tackle together regional and global challenges, try to reduce tensions and promote the spirit of cooperation. So cooperation is at the core of the strategy of the EU, and multilateralism is the rule of law. And there are three key instruments mentioned in the strategy. One is diversifying and strengthening partnerships with like-minded partners, then making sure the EU's existing engagements in the region serve also Europe's interests, but also align with the goals of its key regional partners, and contributing not just to security and stability, but also to regional needs around infrastructure investments, resilient supply chains, emerging technologies, and in areas where a lot of competition in the Indo-Pacific is unfolding. So traditional areas of cooperation have been trade and international standards, but these are in the new Indo-Pacific strategy released are complemented by new areas. And the EU has identified 7 areas of cooperation in the Indo-Pacific region. And it's sustainable and inclusive prosperity to promote responsible business conduct and build resilient supply chains. Then it's the green transition to work on biodiversity, protection, and clean energy. It's the ocean governance to sustainably manage fish resources in the Indian and Pacific Ocean. Of course, digital governance and partnerships to continue to facilitate digital trade between Europe and regional partners and develop the technological sector. Connectivity to promote dialogue on transportation and digital connectivity based on a sustainable and rules-based approach. And security and defense to share intelligence, protect maritime routes, and fight against terrorism and cyber threats. And last but not least, human security to facilitate cooperation in the health sector and coordinate responses to disasters. So the overall aim is the mobilization of like-minded partners for projects and policy areas, so to say a platform to broaden exchanges and dialogues and foster cooperation.
Elli, what is the EU? I heard some echo. I'm not sure coming from your side or.
I don't hear any echo, no.
Okay. Where the EU headed in the Indo-Pacific, what are the driving factors for rising engagement in the Indo-Pacific?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the EU started from just mentioning the region towards a real strategy, which is a huge step for the European Union. And it first started with individual Indo-Pacific guidelines and strategies from France, Germany, the Netherlands, and then the UK, to reaching an EU-wide consensus that the economic and political weight of the region makes it a key player in shaping the international order, and that Europe needs to reassess its engagement and its engagement strategy towards this region. So Europeans have been forced into a rethink by their fears about the consequences of China's rise and by their uncertainty about the United States' commitment to European security and its willingness to protect European interests from negative consequences of the Sino-American rivalry. The EU realized that it has a stake in the region. In its strategy, it says that the futures of the EU and the Indo-Pacific are inextricably linked given the interdependence of the economies and the common global challenges. The Indo-Pacific is the second largest export destination for the EU, and the majority of export transits through the sea lanes of the Indo-Pacific oceans. The EU is the largest trade and investment partner for a lot of Indo-Pacific economies. And there has been a realization that through disrupted supply chains, or if the EU is replaced as a trade or economic partner, the dynamics in the region have an impact on the EU. And this awareness was especially enhanced through the COVID-19 pandemic, but also because of the interlinkages between trade, technology, security, and there's automatically also a security concern for Europe. And further, there is pressure from regional actors on the EU to clarify its stance and position for the region. European countries face many of the same challenges as their partners in the Indo-Pacific region, and geography is relatively unimportant on some of these issues, such as aggressive diplomacy, for example, disinformation campaigns, cyber attacks, 5G rollout, standardization, and supply chain risk management. Of course, climate change, health security, as we have seen through the pandemic, and of course, the protection of the international rules-based order. And these are all problems the EU shares with the Indo-Pacific countries, and where many parallels exist to give reason for more engagement for the EU in the region. And therefore, Europe's new outlook on the Indo-Pacific stems from this maybe recognition of the need to shoulder also a greater responsibility globally. And what is also very important to say and to note and to mention is that the publication of this EU Indo-Pacific strategy had to be approved by all 27 EU member states, and meaning that every member state was forced to deal with the issue of the Indo-Pacific at this level. And this is very remarkable that actually a strategy was released and that the EU actually has got so far as it is right now. So,
Elli, I'm going to ask, as we know, the Indo-Pacific strategy led by United States, and in the region there is a huge rivalry and competition between the US and China. I'm going to ask, is the EU Indo-Pacific strategy directed against China or no?
Of course, a key challenge in the Indo-Pacific is the role and increasingly assertive China, and what role China will play in the region. And the EU strategy recognizes China's attempts to alter the regional status quo, mentioning tensions around contested territories and maritime zones, and a significant military buildup, including by China. And it argues that crises in regional hotspots like the South and East China Seas and also the Taiwan Strait may have a direct impact on European security and prosperity. And although the EU takes an inclusive and cooperation-based approach to the Indo-Pacific, stressing the need to work with China on common challenges, it also, on the other side, adds that the EU will pursue multifaceted engagement with China, encouraging it to play a peaceful role in the region, but at the same time, the EU will continue to protect its essential interests and promote its own values, and will push back where fundamental disagreements exist, such as on human rights, for example. And the adoption of the concept of the Indo-Pacific is part of a move away from the singular focus on China, and instead incorporates China policy into a wider geographic remit that appreciates the dynamism and importance of other countries and policy areas in the region. But however, clear strategies toward China will be vital if European actors wish to meaningfully engage in the region, especially in defense and in security terms. And there is a growing recognition of serious differences between the European and Chinese worldview. So the EU and UK labeling China as a strategic rival, though also a partner in economic terms, but as a systemic competitor, respectively. So, however, the lack of clear and coordinated China strategies risks undermining European Indo-Pacific approaches. The EU, I believe, will continue and prefers its multifaceted engagement with China. And the EU never said that it wants to compartmentalize, and the EU does not want to contribute to confrontation. It prefers to work inclusive, and there is a readiness to work with all partners in the region along with the rules-based order while building strong, lasting partnerships with countries in the Indo-Pacific. But the centrality of the China question to Europe's relationship with countries in the Indo-Pacific and in its foreign and economic policy is getting more obvious. And the EU's Indo-Pacific awakening has been largely prompted by these shifting geopolitical realities and changes in relationship with China, and as well as developments within the country. And as China's growing assertiveness and rivalry with the US increases tensions in the Indo-Pacific, it will, in my opinion, be increasingly hard for Europeans and for the EU to remain neutral in this part. Yeah. So it's a mix.
So, what kind of actions will the EU take in the areas of security and defense in Indo-Pacific region?
The EU cannot provide any security guarantees in the region, and it is well aware of that. The EU is no security alliance. The EU has no own army, and the EU has a steadily growing security dimension, but it's not a defense treaty organization as such. So the sovereign member states have their armed forces, and they individually have their interests in defense fields, such as France, for example, but the EU itself as a whole does not have this army, and it's not interested in putting the money where the mouth is and is faced with limited resources in this field. So security and defense are only one part of the EU's engagement, and it largely relies on trade, infrastructure, investment, technology, and much less on the security and defense part. And Europe recognizes its limits there, and its priorities are in its nearer neighborhood. And however, they try to show symbolically military presence via its member states, with naval presence from France, Germany, and the Netherlands will also send some ships soon. And a meaningful European naval presence, and making sure there is more intra-European coordination through mechanisms to have a coordinated maritime presence are one effort. And it also, the strategy also mentions increasing joint naval exercises, port calls, and reinforcing EU naval diplomacy and participating in these multilateral exercises. The EU wants to engage also in areas of security, but within their capabilities, and does so, for example, with huge financial investments and capacity building, and in cybersecurity resilience, in counterterrorism, in fishery, in climate neutrality. And we should not underestimate these efforts, which are not traditionally in the hard security sector, but in the new security domain, the EU can be very much involved. And moreover, the security cooperation with Japan and the EU has deepened. We had the 2+2 meeting, information sharing, defense and equipment and technology, digital agreements, joint maritime exercises, joint cybersecurity exercises, and joint capacity building measures. Additionally, the EU wants to step up its defense diplomacy and deploy military advisors to EU delegations and set up security and defense dialogues with more partners, including on challenges like cybersecurity, counterterrorism, and non-proliferation. And it also has already started pilot programs to explore closer security cooperation, so as with Japan, Indonesia, India, South Korea, Singapore, and Vietnam. And I don't know if you've seen that, but the ECFR has just recently conducted a wide research on EU's Indo-Pacific views. And this study has shown that there is a clear preference for limiting involvement to non-military activities among the member states. And only 4 out of 27 member states declare a willingness to send warships to the Indo-Pacific, while France already has a naval presence. So the hard security willingness on member state basis is very limited. And in this context, a commitment to enhance connectivity has emerged as the central multidimensional agenda. Digital transport, energy, and human dimensions of connectivity are expected to be addressed in partnership within the Indo-Pacific region. And this focus is likely to become more prominent than.
I think, given the European limited power projection in the region, I think we can distinguish the EU's Indo-Pacific strategy from the US Indo-Pacific strategy, because US Indo-Pacific strategy, I think, more focused directed to China and more militarily.
Yeah.
Ali, okay, where can the EU have its biggest impact and where lie its strengths?
Yeah, well, obviously trade is by essence a cooperative endeavor, and cooperation is increasingly also the key to technological success. So in all these domains, trade and technology, the EU is a potential valuable partner. And I believe the EU can have the most impact on questions of economic security in the Indo-Pacific. And here the strategy takes a broader approach, going beyond concluding more free trade agreements and aiming to work towards resilient and diversified supply chains, stronger rules against unfair practices, and forced technology transfers, and addressing strategic dependencies in supply chains by working with like-minded partners like Japan, South Korea, and Taiwan. And there are other areas where the region is looking for alternatives to Chinese investment in technology, and where Europe has something to contribute. And the strategy, for example, also mentions creating digital partnerships and focusing on AI, 5G, and quantum technology. On infrastructure connectivity, the EU has just announced its global gateway to provide alternatives to China's Belt and Road Initiative. And Indo-Pacific partners like Japan and India have been the first to conclude connectivity partnerships with the EU, and it also wants to plug into and seek complementarity with existing initiatives of the region, so as by Australia, South Korea, and the US or Canada. And then, of course, what is very important and where the EU can be of great value is in the fields of norms, values, and standardizations, especially in the field of emerging technologies, climate change, and cybersecurity. And a big strength could be to rearrange funding in areas where, for example, cybersecurity or research and innovation in the field of emerging technology. And the survey I mentioned before asked, for example, the member states what types of security cooperation or support the member states would like the EU to invest in, as well as those to which they are ready to contribute. And 21 states view cybersecurity as a priority for the EU, much more than the maritime security in this way. So cybersecurity is an area in which there could be a huge opportunity, not only to strengthen Europe's defensive capabilities at home, but also enhance European security through information exchange with partners of the region that face similar challenges, since cybersecurity is a field where geography doesn't matter anymore, but the challenges and the obstacles are the same. And lastly, I would say, generally speaking, it can be a strength of the EU in fostering dialogue and into creating coordination mechanisms with other partners such as ASEAN, India, Australia, Japan, to allow for complementarity and avoid duplication of approaches, projects, and areas in the context of limited resources that we have.
Ellie, when we're talking about the EU-Indo-Pacific and strategic issues, the Indo-Pacific is a very broad region in terms of geography, and at the same time in the area of competition. That's why I'm going to ask one question: who is the key partners of EU in the region?
Yeah. So as I've said earlier on, cooperation is at the core of the EU's Indo-Pacific strategy. And the EU intends primarily to deepen its engagement on the Indo-Pacific, in particular with those partners that have already announced Indo-Pacific approaches of their own. So it's ASEAN, it's Australia, it's India, it's Japan, and these will therefore be partners of choice. And as we can see in the EU's Indo-Pacific strategy, as well as in the strategies from Germany or France, Japan is identified as a core like-minded partner in the region, and already many different approaches for cooperation already exist. Japan, as the inventor of the free and open Indo-Pacific concept, will be the first point of contact in the region.
In terms of technology, or?
Excuse me?
In terms of technology, or in terms of cybersecurity, or in general?
All of it, because the EU and Japan have lots of cooperation angles already and lots of partnerships. They have the economic partnership agreement, they have the EU-Japan strategic partnership agreement, they have the partnership on sustainable connectivity and quality infrastructure. Japan is the first country, the first green alliance partner of the EU in the region, and they have the agreement of data-free flow with trust, which is the largest area of safe data flows. So EU and Japan cooperation is very deep. It will be a very, very important contact country for the EU, and special emphasis with Japan, for example, will probably put on areas that go beyond this hard security, because Japan, as a member of the Quad and alliance partner of the US, has the possibility to be a navigator, or let's say a mediator of different approaches, act complementarily with the EU member states in niche and narrower sectors, such as digitalization, emerging technology, global health, trade, climate change, digital connectivity, and of course cybersecurity. But Japan is not the only important partner for the EU, so please don't misunderstand me there. It's also ASEAN, is also one of a traditional partner of the EU, and ASEAN centrality has been key to EU's approach to the Indo-Pacific, since effective multilateralism is the DNA of the EU, and ASEAN is regarded as a guarantor of the rules-based order and multilateralism. And the ASEAN region is also in the strategy described as an increasingly important partner for the EU in the paper. And while it also notes confidence in signing new trade deals in the region. But the strategy in itself gives also importance to the Europe-India partnership, for example, and it refers to Taiwan, to Australia, to US, to Canada, to South Korea, as other like-minded partners, since, as I've said before, cooperation is the key of the strategy. And an important dimension of the Indo-Pacific strategy is the emergence of coalitions among like-minded partners, or flexible coalitions, so to say, be it through bilateral member states relationships or from the EU side as a whole. And the EU strategy opens the possibility and the willingness to work with other partners and coalitions. And for example, it also explicitly mentions working with Quad groupings on topics like vaccines or climate change or emerging technologies. And this suggests that Europe has options when it comes to engaging with the region, and that it can support its Indo-Pacific partners with both bilateral and multilateral engagement as appropriate.
Ellie, now Germany has frigate in the region, frigate Bear, and already published this Indo-Pacific strategy. How does the Germany fit in the Indo-Pacific strategy?
Yeah. So Germany published its policy guidelines for the Indo-Pacific in September last year. And Germany acknowledged the Indo-Pacific as the region where, more than anywhere else, the shape of the international rules-based order will be decided. The guidelines commit Germany to co-shaping this international order based on rules and international cooperation, and not on the law of the strong. So as a very export-oriented economy, Germany has an enormous stake in functioning global supply chains and open trade routes. And Germany's policy towards the Indo-Pacific has long focused on these economic interdependence and the key drivers of trade. They outline now the new expectation of taking on more global responsibility and following a more strategic and comprehensive approach to the region, and Germany as part of the wider European Union, and supports an open and inclusive Indo-Pacific. Particular weight is given to intensifying relations also with like-minded partners, including Australia, Japan, New Zealand, and South Korea. And the German guidelines embed in a broader European approach to the region. So Germany is a strong advocate for the EU's Indo-Pacific strategy. As you've said, Germany has sent its frigate Bayern on a 6-month mission through the Indo-Pacific waters. They started in August this year, and the visit has two purposes. From the security side, they aim to demonstrate that Germany actively stands up for the freedom of navigation in international waters and compliance with international law. And from a diplomatic perspective, the port stops in combination with joint naval exercises with Australia, Japan, and the US underline Germany's stance alongside its democratic value partners in the region. So the Sino-US rivalry and changing transatlantic relations and priorities were certainly a catalyst for Germany to reconsider its policies. And yet Germany does not wish to put itself as a confrontational player in the region. Rather, the guidelines target an inclusive approach where rules and standards are at the top and not power struggles, so to say. Germany is often seen as slow or undetermined and a latecomer in China policy, and that it's largely because of Chancellor Merkel's approach to China until now. But within Germany, the critiques of China have increased. And just recently, the current defense minister, Elli-Katharina raised awareness of China's policies in an interview with Politico, where she said that dealing with China is about how the world order and our ways of life will be shaped and changed, and that no strategic ambiguity vis-a-vis China is of any help anymore. The vast majority of EU member states see the Indo-Pacific as an area of huge economic opportunity. And at a time of increasing great power rivalry and this enormous localization pressure in China, there's a growing need for diversification within the region away from this dominant China market. And this is particularly true for German industry, which is heavily involved in these Chinese markets and deeply intertwined with China through its supply chains. And German companies start to wake up to this challenge and also try to push for diversification agenda and reinforce this political dynamic at the EU level as well. So coming back to the frigate, just recently China refused the German port call, which means that even though Germany tries to have this inclusive Indo-Pacific approach and inclusive Indo-Pacific strategy, at the same time, by the refusal of the port call, China is also clearly setting boundaries and is implying that Germany, you cannot have it all. You cannot have an inclusive strategy. You have to decide. You have to make a choice. And so I guess the next German administration, which is, they try to form that at the moment, and hopefully by December we have a new government, will, in my opinion, have to take a clearer position on China than the Merkel government did until now. So it will be very interesting to see how developments there will unfold.
Elli, I'm going to ask about one question about the UK. What kind of effects does the UK in the Indo-Pacific region, with the different agendas from the European Union countries, have on the EU's Indo-Pacific strategy?
Detaching from the EU meant for the UK that it was forced to turn to the rest of the world in a way that was not necessary before. So the UK is in need to replace many of the EU's international trade agreements and look for partners to cooperate on security, climate change, and digitalization. And the UK, just like others in Europe, has realized that many of these partners are to be found in the Indo-Pacific. The UK shares the unifying concern of other countries who have Indo-Pacific strategies that China's increasing assertiveness and what it means to the rules-based international order. And the UK now sees competition in the Indo-Pacific playing out in regional militarization across all domains, maritime tensions, and a contest over the rules and norms linked to trade and technology. And they seek to do more to reinforce parts of the international architecture that are under threat and shape the international order by working with others. And the UK's approach to the Indo-Pacific will particularly focus on non-traditional areas of security that directly impact the key pillar of sovereignty through their integrated review release. And the review also noted that the UK must adapt its statecraft to a new era to help shape the international order. And this includes areas of diplomacy, science, technology, cybersecurity, national security, dispute resolution, but also technology and data development. But the UK is a very, very crucial partner for the Indo-Pacific endeavor of the EU. And for many member states within the EU, the UK remains a crucial cooperation partner, especially for the Indo-Pacific. The UK is a key coalition partner for the areas of security and defense, which the EU cannot provide by themselves. And through Brexit, the EU has lost one of its major security actor and the only real military strength left is France, so to say, but France cannot do the trick alone. So the UK, for many member states, is therefore central for the EU in the security field. And the second field, which sometimes is a little underestimated, in my opinion, is also the regional expertise the UK has on the countries of the Indo-Pacific. With Brexit, this is also something that left from the EU, especially knowledge on India, ASEAN, and the political knowledge, which goes beyond just culture and history. And these are the political and strategic regional expertise the UK has and the UK can deliver is of great benefit from the EU and what the EU also needs complementarily. I think France, Germany, Netherlands, the EU, the UK, they all have their Indo-Pacific strategies, their guiding documents, their frameworks, and when taken together with other complementary initiatives, so for example on vaccines or on cyber, the opportunities for coordination and cooperation can be numerous and very, very valuable. So the UK and the EU have many overlapping interests, and there is an imperative to avoid duplication of efforts and try to collaborate. And despite post-Brexit and post-AUKUS tensions, the UK and European partners, it would be a pity not to find areas of cooperation in the Indo-Pacific given their shared objectives that they have, and in some areas their limited resources, and also based on the previous cooperation experience they had. So complementarity would be best.
Yes, but recently there is a great agreement. One of the French foreign ministry called agreement as a agreement of century. I'm talking about the AUKUS agreement.
Yeah.
What impact does the AUKUS agreement have on the EU's Indo-Pacific strategy? Because one of the main countries of European Union, France, were excluded to the agreement, and now there is another, how I can say, military coalition established between the AUKUS, United States, and the UK in the region.
Yeah. Well, I believe AUKUS does not change the substance of the EU's Indo-Pacific strategy, and I also believe that it should not do that. Of course, and there's no doubt, the optics of the whole AUKUS agreement were very bad, and it raised a lot of the trust issue and trust concern, which is perfectly understandable. But views of AUKUS were not the same all over Europe. Germany and also others were very cautious of the fact that they don't want to destroy the progress made in the transatlantic relationship with the US on China, which they did behind the scenes, and also on Europe's increasing interest in engaging with the Indo-Pacific. Of course, AUKUS was a message, and I believe it was a message that the global strategic center of gravity has shifted, and it has shifted towards the Indo-Pacific, and especially that the US foreign policy clearly prioritizes the Indo-Pacific now. And I believe that it means now for the EU to collectively get more engaged in the region, and that it can be taken as an opportunity, as a push, so to say, and also as a reminder that they cannot afford to just focus on European debates anymore. They have to broaden their concentration and their focus. Instead, a global outlook is necessary at the moment, and to decide where global politics stands and where Europe stands in these global politics, and where exactly it wants itself to be positioned. So I believe the AUKUS deal just reinforces for Europe that the Indo-Pacific is very, very important, and that it's not about doing less or getting away from it or losing focus. Instead, it's an opportunity of doing more in areas where Europe can be taken seriously, with strong cooperation partners of the region, as we've discussed before. And the Indo-Pacific, the whole Indo-Pacific concept is the perfect opportunity to do that. But at the same time, the expectations and the objectives should be realistic. So I also believe that I don't believe that AUKUS made a divergence, for example, between the US and the EU. There are still many, many ways where the EU and the US can work together and advance their shared interests. And we saw it in the Trade and Technology Council. So overall, it can be said that it's actually very good that the EU has an Indo-Pacific strategy now. And but also with AUKUS, but also in my opinion, despite AUKUS, the question is, by releasing the strategy, will this be a start, or will they just stop there? And now we have the strategy, we've done enough, we made our point. So it is still unclear how significant the strategy will be. And of course, this will be determined by the content, of course, but also how it's going to be implemented at the end. So Europe will need to set measurable goals, realistic goals, and work to achieve them by making sustainable financial contributions and commitment to the regions, but also security commitments. And I think most EU member states still mainly view the Indo-Pacific as a region of economic opportunity. And the challenge created by China's rise is becoming clearer, but there's a real risk that Europe's strategic approach to the region may not be more than just a set of principles without real substance. So the key is now to give the substance to the strategy. And the EU has started, in my opinion, doing things right. But it remains to be seen how far implementation will actually succeed. And the whole process of developing an EU-Indo-Pacific strategy has been very, very valuable, in my opinion. And most of all, it has triggered a debate within Europe, within the member states, and thereby moved the Indo-Pacific very, very much on the Europeans' agenda. And this is already very important and necessary and a big step. And I believe a good, despite the approach of having cooperation partners, defining like-minded partners, building mechanisms of dialogue, of cooperation in narrow areas, in niche sectors, where the European Union clearly can make a change and clearly also position itself, would be a good start in my opinion.
So you say, excuse me, you say there will be no any significant implication of AUKUS on the European EU strategy, Indo-Pacific strategy?
I believe the EU's, as I tried to explain, I believe the chances are that the Indo-Pacific will remain on the European Union's agenda, on Europe's agenda, and it will reinforce and be taken as an opportunity to strengthen areas where the European Union can be of greater value for the region. Yes.
Okay, Elli, thank you very much. I come to the end of my show. You're really driving a great picture about the Indo-Pacific and EU involvement in the Indo-Pacific region. Thank you very much for joining me today.
Yeah, thank you
for
very much.
your great knowledge and horizon about the region.
Thank you very much for inviting me. It was my pleasure to give you some insights, and I hope I could draw a better picture of what the EU can do in the Indo-Pacific and should do in the Indo-Pacific. So thank you very much for the invitation today and for having me in your show.
Thank you, Elli.